Hi, I'm Ash, your guide through the dark alleys of true crime and the corridors of intriguing history, all while we whip up a delicious feast for both the mind and the mouth. Today we're going to be making 10-minute bagel pizzas while we talk about the Gilgo Beach serial killings. This case has also been called the Long Island serial killer, Manorville Butcher, and the Craigslist Ripper. But before we get started, just a reminder, everything I will talk about today is for educational purposes and is based on information that is available on the internet. Please remember, this channel isn't the place to air your grievances. And also, please be kind. The recipes I'm making today will be in the description box below and at the end of the video. And if you like the video, please hit the subscribe button. It'll help a girl out. This wasn't even the video I planned on uploading today. I had one already in the 1904 Olympic Marathon, but then last Thursday night, Rex Heuermann was arrested near his office on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and pizza helped capture him. So I thought it was perfect. Today, I'm making my 10-minute bagel pizzas while we talk about this horrible story. So let's get started. So in honor of pizza helping bring down a serial killer, I'm going to be making bagel pizzas today. They are great to make for crowds. I'm going to be making them in an air fryer, so it's really a 5-minute recipe, but if you put them in your oven on a baking sheet, 10 minutes you can have these ready for a crowd. I freeze my bagels, keep them ready for when I want pizza. These are everything bagels, and they're also uncut. I prefer because you can get more pizzas out of them. Also, I would normally use a bread knife if they were thawed out, but since it's not, I'm just going to use a sharp knife to cut and get my slices. This is about how thick you'd want them. I'll cut the other slice in a second. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to stick these in the oven to get them crispy, or like I said, I'm going to stick them into the air fryer. And when they are done, we'll start making the pizzas and assembling them. I did forget to say you'd want to brush a little bit of olive oil on all of them. You don't have to do this, it'll toast without it, but I just like a really crunchy bagel when it's going to be the crust for a pizza. So oil them up, and you're probably gonna have to flip them a couple of times, whether they're in the oven or on the air fryer like I'm going to be doing, but they should be done in 2 to 3 minutes. Don't let them stay in too long or they'll burn. While we're waiting for those to brown, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fry up my pepperoni. I like them nice and crispy. That way you're not going to be cooking long enough in the oven for them to get crispy in the oven, and they'll be crispy instead here. Another tip, once the pepperonis are done, what I love to do is take the oil. I'll actually sometimes even put in extra oil with the olive oil. So when the pepperonis are cooked, you pull them out, you leave the oil in there, take it off the heat, and add some crushed red pepper and some salt, and you'll have a really nice hot chili oil to go on your pizza, or you can also put it in the fridge for a couple of weeks, and this works great with eggs or really anything else that you're cooking that you'd like to spice up really quickly. While the pepperoni is cooking, the last thing I'm going to be doing is slicing up a jalapeno. Obviously, you can tell from my comment about the hot oil, I like things spicy, and I love some fresh jalapeno on my pizza, but I'm going to do a bunch of toppings that you can do on the description box, because this also makes a great barbecue pizza, a great Greek pizza with feta cheese and Kalamata olives. It's just a really nice quick dinner if you need something in just a few minutes. I also decided I wanted to put a little bit of fresh basil on the pizza. You really can put whatever you want, but this is just what I'm in the mood for today. Spicy basil pepperoni. Sorry for the noise in the last video too. The bagels are cooked, they're crispy. I don't know if you can tell, but they've got a really nice sound to them. They're basically like crackers. That's the consistency you want. From there, you'd put your pizza sauce. I make my own. It's actually a marinara sauce, and then when I'm going to use it as pizza sauce, I add a little bit of tomato paste to it, but it is delicious. I'll put the description, obviously the recipe in the description, but if you're trying to do something quickly, don't worry about my pizza sauce recipe. Just grab a jar of pizza sauce. It will taste not just as good, but it'll still be good. All right, we got that on. Then I've got mozzarella. And I suggest not doing this if you're cooking it on a cookie sheet in the oven. Don't do this on the cookie sheet because it will burn whatever cheese is fallen off, though that cheese tastes amazing. So if you want that, just be sure to put aluminum foil first. I'm gonna put my pepperoni. I can't even speak. This is going to be amazing. And my jalapeños and my basil. You can stack these up as much or as little as you want. My only tip is don't go overboard on the cheese. It can get too thick on these because they're cooking so quickly. You're literally just putting it back in there for the toppings to melt. And you've got then some Parmesan on top of the mozzarella. And these little guys are ready to bake. Another tip though is I don't want to eat these till the video's over, so I'm not going to stick them in right now. I'm going to bake them right at the end so that I could have hot pizza when we're all done. On Friday, July 14th, 2023, Rodney Harrison, the Suffolk County Commissioner, said Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruins families. I've got to say Rex's last name has a lot of vowels and I say it differently every time. So for the rest of this video, I'll call him Rex. And there are a lot of names of people and places that I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce, so my apologies in advance. Rex was charged with first and second degree murder of 3 women, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He is also the prime suspect in the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Just to be clear, he's not been convicted, and the American Criminal Code says that he is innocent until proven guilty. There's some pretty damning evidence, though. His car, Chevrolet Avalanche, was described by a witness as being connected to Amber Costello's disappearance. Then, around the end of January 2023, a team that was surveilling Rex was able to get his DNA off of a pizza crust in a Manhattan trash can. So it matched the DNA that was collected at the crime scene. Go pizza! Rex had been extensively Googling the victims' families. At a press conference on Friday, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney said that Rex used an online account to repeatedly view images of his alleged victims and their family. Quote, he was compulsively searching pictures of the victims, but not only pictures of the victims, pictures of their relatives, their sisters, their children, and he was trying to locate those individuals. Rex had burner phones that were confiscated, and technology pinpointed the location of burner phones they believed the killer used to contact the victims in the hours before they disappeared. For years, investigators suspected that the suspect lived on Long Island and commuted to Manhattan through Penn Station. And the cell phone ping at the transportation hub is part of the evidence. Then there's a belt that's in evidence. The belt they believe belongs to the killer. When they released it to the public, they said it was a belt of a large man and showed the belt buckle, which had initials on it. The initials were either WH or HM. I know, those initials aren't right for Rex Heuermann, but how about William Heuermann, who was Rex's paternal grandfather? And other evidence is that hair found on the 3 of the victims was later found to have DNA belonging to Rex's wife. And before you ask, no, she isn't a suspect. She liked to go to Comic Cons and on vacations and was out of state for all 3 murders Rex is being charged for. She was in New Jersey in September 2010 when Costello vanished, and in Iceland July 29th when Bartholomew was last seen. I don't know where she was for the other one. So who is this Rex dude? He's a 59-year-old husband and father of 2, a daughter and a stepson. He's an architect, and by Rex's own words, he was born and raised on Long Island. He lived in Massapequa Park. That's fun to see, Massapequa Park. It's a tightly gridded village of homes. They're neat homes with manicured lawns. He lived there with his wife and kids. The kids are not little, thank goodness. One of them actually worked at his firm with him. Rex was the son of an aerospace engineer, and he lived in that house that he grew up in, that he was still living in it, and he tinkered with furniture in his father's old workshop. A man who went to high school with him said Rex was bullied as a teenager, but sometimes fought back. In 1990, he married an executive at an office supply company, and Rex then founded the New York City firm RH Consultants and Associates in 1994. According to the company's website, his clients included Target, Foot Locker, Catholic Charities, and American Airlines. And throughout the years, Rex also provided services to other agencies and not-for-profit agency, nonprofit builder developers, and individual owners of buildings in regards to building codes and zoning consultations. Also, Billy Baldwin tweeted on Friday that he went to school with Rex. Billy said, "Woke up this morning to learn that the Gilgo Beach serial killer suspect was my high school classmate Rex Heuermann." Then he went on to say that they went to Massapequa Burners High School and graduated in 1981. Now I've got to stop there for a second. Billy Baldwin. Can I call you Billy? That's not something to brag about. Brag about your high school wrestling career. I heard you were good. Brag about your beautiful, talented wife. She's the Phillips part of Wilson Phillips. I mean, someday somebody's gonna make you wanna turn around and say goodbye. Okay, I can't sing, I'm sorry. Hold on for one more day. That is very braggable. Brag about the time you slowed down your car not to hit a kid or a squirrel on the street. Don't tweet about your serial killer 23andMe connection. Just don't. Okay, so reeling it in, Rex's neighbors had mixed opinions about him. The New York Times said he had glowered at neighbors while swinging an axe in the front yard of a low-slung, dilapidated house that parents cautioned their children to avoid on Halloween. One neighbor said that he would cross the street so you wouldn't have to cross on the same side. He was someone you didn't want to approach. Then another neighbor said, "We've been here for about 30 years. The guy's been quiet, never really bothers anybody. We were kind of shocked, to tell you the truth." Those mixed opinions followed him in his professional life, and he also has been years late in paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes and has repeatedly filed lawsuits accusing drivers of injuring him in car accidents. And I found out, or I read somewhere, that he was also kicked out of a Whole Foods for stealing fruit. I found a lot more information on him, but until, if and when he's convicted, let's focus instead on the crimes he's accused of. The Gilgo Beach murders. They've been unsolved for a really long time. It started with the discovery of human remains near Gilgo Beach in Suffolk County, New York. It's believed that the serial killer murdered between 10 and 18 people over a period of nearly 16 years, and is thought to have disposed of their bodies in areas on the south shore of Long Island, New York. Most of the victims were sex workers who advertised on Craigslist. The victims' remains were found over a period of months in 2010 and 2011 after the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert. That resulted in a police search of the area along Ocean Parkway that was near the remote beach towns of Gilgo and Oak Beach. Those are both in Suffolk County, New York. The remains of 4 victims that were designated the Gilgo 4 were found within a quarter mile of each other near Gilgo Beach in December of 2010. 6 more sets of remains were found in March and April of 2011. Those were found in Suffolk and in Nassau counties. Police believe the latter sets of remains predate the 4 bodies that were found in December 2010. So let's talk about Shannon Gilbert for a minute. Who is she? Glad you asked. So Shannon Maria Gilbert was born on October 24th, 1986. She grew up in Ellenville, a small town in upstate New York. She was the oldest of 4 sisters in her family. Although I couldn't find specific details about her upbringing and family, it's known that she came from a close-knit family, but it's also reported that when she was 7 years old, she was put in foster care because her mom couldn't care for her and her 3 sisters. She was known to be an aspiring actress and had attended community college in upstate New York. But in spring of 2010, she was working as a sex worker. On May 1st, 2010, 24-year-old Shannon left for a client's residence in Oak Beach after midnight. At 4:51 in the morning, 911 dispatchers received a panicked 23-minute phone call from Gilbert, who was heard saying that there's someone after her and that they were trying to kill her. She was last seen a short time later banging on the front door of a nearby Oak Beach residence, and she was screaming for help before she ran off into the night. Her story alone is fascinating. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a story dedicated to her,
as she's not one of the victims Rex was charged for. Or, if you want to see more about the Gilbert family, Netflix has a true crime bioepic called Lost Girls that's based on Robert Kolker's book of the same name. And it follows the true crime story of Mary Gilbert, that's Shannon's mom, who dedicated her life to finding out what had happened to her 24-year-old daughter. Shannon Gilbert, she did it though after she was found dead. Shannon was Marie's oldest, followed by her sisters Cherie, Sarah, and Stevie. The movie largely focuses on Mary, but it reveals aspects of her relationship with all four of her daughters. And then actually Mary was murdered in 2016. I haven't seen the movie, so tell me if it's any good, but I'm getting off course again. So the investigation that caused the discovery of all the bodies was prompted by the search for Shannon Gilbert, who's a 24-year-old woman. She disappeared May 1st. Like I said before, she had been fleeing a client's home. She made that 23-minute emergency call to 911. "They're trying to kill me," she said on the call. I listened to it. For whatever reason, she sounded very messed up. Her driver's name was Michael Park, and the man who had hired her was Joseph Brewer. They could both be heard talking in the background of her call. Brewer was telling her to leave his home. In the call, she didn't say where she was. Dominic Verone, who was a former Suffolk County Chief of Detectives, told CBS News that she didn't sound coherent, but she did sound scared. She went to a neighbor's home, Gus Galletti. He got there about 5 a.m. Someone heard yelling, "Help me," and opened the door. He said she kept saying, "Help me," but wouldn't answer his questions. He called 911 and told her to come inside. And he wanted her to sit and wait, but she ran away and hid under one of his boats outside instead. While her driver, Michael Park, was driving around, I don't really know what he was doing. Later, she went to another neighbor's home. That neighbor was Barbara Brennan. Barbara said she was there at about 5:21 a.m. and knocked on the door. Barbara also called 911, but Shannon ran away again. After that, no one heard from her again. A month after Shannon's terrified call to the police and her disappearance, the Suffolk County Police Department's Missing Persons Bureau asked Officer John Malia to search for Gilbert with his trained cadaver dog, a German Shepherd, who's named Blue. Isn't he cute? I'm talking about the dog, Blue, the dog. Of course, over the summer of 2010, Malia unsuccessfully searched the gated beach community where Gilbert had last been seen. The officer made a new attempt on the search in December 2010, saying at that time he stayed close to the shoulder of the parkway because the FBI data indicated that dumped bodies frequently were found closer to roadways. Despite the thick vegetation and a light layer of snow, Malia's dog Blue alerted to a scent which the pair tracked to a skeleton in the disintegrating burlap bag. Go guys, go Blue. The remains were later identified as Melissa Bartholomew's. Police discovered 3 additional bodies while they were searching the scene for further evidence. The bodies of the 4 victims, Maureen Brainerd, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, were found approximately 500 yards from each other, and they became known as the Gilgo Four. Of course, because of this, the police kept scouring the area, and in March 2011, partial remains of Jessica Taylor were found along Ocean Parkway. 8 years earlier, in 2003, other parts of her body had been found in Manorville, a town in Suffolk County, which is about 45 minutes away from Gilgo. Next month, in April 2011, police discovered 3 additional sets of remains: an unidentified female toddler, an unidentified Asian person, and Valerie Mack. Partial remains like those of Jessica Taylor. They'd been found also in Manorville years earlier in November of 2000. 2 more bodies were then found in Nassau County: an unidentified woman whose partial remains had previously been found on Fire Island in 1996, and another unidentified woman with a distinctive tattoo of peaches, who later was found to be the mother of the unidentified toddler that was found in Suffolk County, Gilgo Beach. So we have got all these bodies, but let's fast forward. On May 9, 2011, police speculated that because of the similarities in the cases, Valerie Mack, who was unidentified, and Jessica Taylor may have been murdered by a separate killer. But then in the same year, on November 2011, The police announced that no, they believed it was one person responsible for all 10 murders, and that the perpetrator is almost certainly from Long Island. The single killer theory stemmed from the common characteristics between the conditions of the remains and forensic evidence that was related to the bodies. Basically, law enforcement believed that a serial killer or killers were responsible for the murders due to the similarities in the victims, their profiles, and the manner in which their bodies were disposed of. They were petite young people, mainly women. The victims were often strangled, and their bodies were wrapped in burlap or plastic bags before being dumped in the area. Then, in December of 2011, after 19 months of searching, the police finally found Shannon Gilbert's remains in a marsh, half a mile from where she was last seen, near Oak Beach, which is really in close proximity to Gilgo Beach. Her case is still strange, and the cause of her death has been said to be accidental drowning, but also to be consistent with homicidal asphyxiation. I know that's a lot of people, so let's take a look at the murders Rex has been accused of, and then I'll briefly talk about the other victims. I'm going to go in the order of what they went, how they went missing. First, Rex is considered the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Maureen was reported missing by a friend to the Norwich Police Department 16 years ago. It actually was 16 years to the day that Rex was arrested, July 14th of 2007. Maureen was born on July 14th, 1982 in New London, Connecticut. Her parents' names were Marie and Robert. Maureen had grown up in Groton, Connecticut, and attended Fitch High School before she became a mother at 17 and had 2 children. She was 25 when she disappeared. Maureen was very petite, at 4 foot 11 inches tall, and she was only 105 pounds. She had brown hair and green eyes. A friend described her as someone who had a lot of energy and thought everyone was her friend. And she was very giving, loyal, smart, creative. In her life, it said that she had worked as a card dealer at Foxwoods Resort Casino, which is up in that area. Then later she'd worked as a telemarketer and also a cashier. But telemarketing wasn't paying what she needed it to. She wasn't getting her bills paid. And she was about to be in an expensive custody battle for her son. So she and a fellow telemarketer, Sarah, also worked as paid escorts via Craigslist. She'd been out of the sex industry for 7 months before she disappeared, but had recently returned to the work in order to pay her bills after receiving an eviction notice from her apartment landlord. Her family didn't know until after she disappeared that she was working as an escort, and they didn't know that she was in financial trouble. Her sister figured it all out by going through Maureen's emails after she disappeared. Her sister was devastated, but her main focus was still on finding her sister. Maureen's friends knew there was a problem when she stopped calling because she was known as being constantly on her phone. She was last seen on July 9th, 2007, saying she planned to spend the day in New York City. She told her sister that she had a modeling gig. So here is her disappearance timeline. Authorities believe that on July 6, 2007, Maureen took an Amtrak train from New London, Connecticut to Grand Central Terminal in New York, in the city. They'd been flagged on Craigslist, so they couldn't post there for what they were wanting to sell. So they decided to hire a photographer, and until the 9th, they kind of wandered around New York City's tourists. They were staying at and working out of a Super 8 motel that was in Manhattan. But according to police, Sarah returned home earlier than Maureen on the 9th. Maureen had stayed longer to make more money. They still were not back on Craigslist, but they had regular clients, and Maureen stayed to meet someone. Her last known communication was at 11:43 p.m. on July 9th, 2007, when she called her sister Missy from Penn Station. Missy thought Maureen had gone to work for a modeling gig, and when she spoke to her at the train station, she could hear the background noises of the trains and of the people and of the city, and Maureen sounded fine. She told Missy that she was on her way home, and her last words to her sister were, "I'll see you in the morning. I love you." She had also on that night called a friend in Connecticut and told her that she was planning on meeting a client outside of the Super 8 motel that she'd been staying at. The Suffolk County Police later said, although she was known to work out of the motel rooms, on the night of July 9th, 2007, she told her friend she would be going to meet someone outside of the motel on an out call. Shortly after her disappearance, Maureen's friend Sarah received a phone call from a man on an unfamiliar number. The man claimed he had just seen Maureen and that she was alive and staying at a whorehouse in Queens. He refused to identify himself and could not tell Sarah the location of the house. He told Sarah he would call back and give her the address, but he never called again. Sarah said that the man had no discernible New York or Boston accent, and Maureen was never seen again until her remains were found off Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach on December 13th, 2010, during the search for Shannon Gilbert. She'd been strangled. Next was Melissa Bartholomew. Melissa was the next to go missing, and she was also the first of the Gilgo Four to be found. Melissa was born on July 10th, 1987 in Buffalo, New York. She grew up in the Bronx and was known to have a close relationship with her family. She was tiny, 4 foot 10 inches tall and 95 pounds. She had blonde hair and hazel eyes. She grew up in upstate New York and graduated from South Park School in Buffalo. Not making that name up, South Park. She then got her cosmetology license and worked briefly at Supercuts. Melissa moved to the Bronx in 2007 at the age of 20. She had big dreams of owning a business, and her mother Lynn said in an interview she wanted to make money for a salon of her own. And originally, when she moved to New York, she was working in a salon. Her uncle, Jim Martinez, said that she was drawn to the city's appeal as a center of commerce. She loved New York City, he said. She loved the excitement of the city. She loved to shop. That's what she was, a shopper. He said his niece had the most wonderful personality he'd ever seen, and that she was just so full of life. At the time of her disappearance, Melissa was living in the Bronx. She had reportedly been posting as an escort sex worker through Craigslist, and she was reported missing on July 12, 2009, when she was 24 years old. She was last seen near her home, and her family became concerned when they were unable to reach her. First, they looked on the internet. I'm not clear what they were looking for on the internet, but then after that, they called hospitals and subsequently filed a missing persons report. On the night she went missing, she met with a client, deposited $900 in her bank account, and attempted to call an old boyfriend, but she wasn't able to get through. Beginning 1 week later and lasting for 5 weeks, her 15-year-old sister Amanda received a series of vulgar, mocking, and insulting calls from a man who may have been the killer using Melissa's cell phone. The caller asked if Amanda was a whore like her sister. This guy, I do not like him. The calls became increasingly disturbing and eventually culminated in the caller telling Amanda that her sister was dead and that he was going to watch her rot. In total, he called her 7 times. Police traced some of the calls to Madison Square Garden, Midtown Manhattan, and to Massapequa Park, but they were unable to determine who was making them. Melissa's mother noted that there were a lot of calls to Manorville from her daughter's phone around the time of her disappearance. In September 2017, John Biltroff, a carpenter from that town, was convicted of 2 other murders. He was also named as a suspect in the serial cases. Obviously, he didn't do it. Don't get me wrong, he was a murderer, but not her murderer. Her skeletal remains were discovered in a brush area off Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach on December 11th, 2010. It was as they were searching for Shannon's body, according to the police department. Her skeletonized remains, it refers to a body in its final stage of decomposition, and that's what they said that she was. And it would take months to years to reach that, depending on environment and other factors. Melissa had also been strangled to death. next of the Gilgo Four to go missing was Megan Waterman. Megan was from Maine. Megan had grown up in the coastal town of Scarborough, and Megan was 5 foot 5 inches tall. She weighed 145 pounds and had brown eyes and brown hair that was bleached blonde. She was 22 years old when she disappeared. Megan's mother, Lorraine Ellis, said, "The world lost an awesome girl, a wonderful, wonderful mom, and a friend." She told that to the New York Magazine, that she'd missed out a lot on her daughter's childhood because she was often drunk. But when Megan became pregnant at 17, she moved in with her mom, Ella, and the two reconnected. Megan's mom said Megan was fun, caring, a loving mom. If you ever met Megan, you'd fall right in love with her. Megan's daughter was only 3 years old when Megan went missing. She's now in high school, and reportedly the daughter is doing well and living in Maine with a relative. I did see a video on them where she was talking about her mom's disappearance, and she's a beautiful young girl, and hopefully she'll have a good life. So Megan had been pushed into working as a sex worker by her 20-year-old abusive criminal boyfriend, Acom Cruz. This story has a lot of jerk guys. I'm sorry, it just does. Yeah, they're pretty much all jerks if I'm talking about them, other than like Blue and Officer Malia and the other officers. But okay, so anyways, Akeem. He had her as a prostitute. He would take her to Long Island, and it sounds like he would rent her out from there by placing advertisements on Craigslist as an escort. Megan went missing June 6, 2010. The previous day, she had told that she was going out and would call him later. At the time of her disappearance, she was staying in a motel in Halpo, I think it's pronounced New York, 15 minutes northeast of Gilgo Beach. Her family said she always called every day when she was on the road to speak to her 3-year-old daughter, Liliana, but the last such call came at 9:50 p.m. on June 5th. The police said Waterman, who advertised her escort services on Craigslist, was seen in the early morning hours of 2010 at a Holiday Inn Express in Halpo, New York. Surveillance footage captured her last sighting, according to the book about the case. It's called Lost Girls, an Unsolved American Mystery. So she talked to her daughter at 9:50 on the 5th, then about 4 hours later, at 1:30 a.m. on June 6th, she was seen on camera outside the hotel. Megan was walking down a side path, and she was never seen alive again. Akeem called her family and said she was missing, and they reported her disappearance to the police. At first, of course, Akeem was their main suspect because he was already on the police's radar, and the FBI got involved almost immediately. Also, Akeem was the one that set up her dates. So the police thought it was probably unlikely that he didn't know who she went off with that night. But eventually they determined he was a scumbag, but he didn't know who Megan had gone off with that night, and that he wasn't the reason she had disappeared. I still think he could be part of the reason. I mean, come on. He was selling her. He was making her go out. Okay, sorry. So the detectives continued to search for her, just like all the other missing people that they continued to search for. She was found 6 months later. The skeletal remains of Megan were also found on December 13th, 2010, shortly after Maureen Brainerd Barnes and Amber Costello's remains were discovered. She was found about 370 feet away from Maureen on the same strip of brush off of the Ocean Parkway. She had been strangled. The last of the Gilgo Four to go missing was Amber Costello. Amber was last seen leaving her home in North Babylon, Long Island, early September 2010, and getting into a client's car, according to the book Lost Girls again. Amber was also tiny. She was only 4 foot 11 inches and weighed about 100 pounds. She was 27 years old when she disappeared. She was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, and raised in the state's charming, it's so nice, coastal city of Wilmington. She was married twice in her life and adored her 4 nieces. She was very involved in her faith, and a local church reverend, I think his name was Wayne Griffiths, he was a former pastor at the First Baptist Church of Babylon, said she loved Christmas. She was very generous. Even though she didn't have a lot, she was always giving. He also said that she possessed an intuitive gift. She was able to use her own struggles to help others. She had battled with substance abuse. One friend said she was amazing, and she was just as tormented as she was amazing. The only reason she was working as a sex worker was to support her drug addiction. Amber's older sister, Kimberly Overstreet, said that she had brought Amber to New York a year before her death to get her admitted into a rehab program. While she got sober initially, her sister said that she eventually went back into sex work and started using drugs again. Amber shared a home with 2 male roommates and another female roommate. All of them struggled with heroin addiction. The male roommates would arrange dates with clients for the female roommates. They often involved scams, where the 4 of them would confront the clients for money before any sexual acts actually occurred. Costello did in-calls in her home as well as out-calls. Prior to moving to West Babylon, Amber had been living with her second husband in Clearwater, Florida, and had been working as a waitress. She was at one time a strong student, but her drug addiction, it began when she was a teenager. She'd reportedly been sexually assaulted when she was 6 years old, and she just had a lot of problems. She was in a tough spot. Amber went missing on September 2nd, 2010. She reportedly went missing when she went to meet a stranger who'd called her several times, and he'd offered her $1,500 for her services. Her family believed that she was in a residential drug rehab center, and so she wasn't immediately reported as missing. When she stopped responding to their messages, they were like, oh, she must be back in rehab. Amber's body was discovered on December 13th, 2010. I actually don't know how long it was after she went missing that her family reported her. I just know it wasn't immediately. She had also been strangled. Now, these 4, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, are often discussed together for multiple reasons. Their bodies were bound and hidden in thick underbrush along a remote beach highway. It was across the bay from Massapequa Park. That was the community where Rex has lived all his life, and they were within hundreds of feet of each other. They were all petite young women who had advertised themselves as escorts on Craigslist, and they were all strangled to death. They were all in burlap bags, and so they're hopefully the ones that Rex will go down for. He's the ones that he'll rot for them. But I want to give you a brief overview of the other people who were found. 24-year-old Valerie Mack, also known as Melissa Taylor, she's also known as Jane Doe number 6, was living in Philadelphia and working as an escort when she went missing in 2000. Like many of the victims, she was small in stature, about 5 foot tall, and weighed about 100 pounds. Valerie's partial remains were discovered in Manorville, New York, which, like I said before, it's about 45 minutes from Gilgo Beach, on November 19th, 2000, but her remains were not identified until 2020. Her torso was found in Manorville. It was wrapped in a garbage bag and dumped in the woods near the intersection of Halsey Manor Road and Mill Road. They were adjacent to a set of power lines and a nearby power line access road. Then on April 4th, 2011, her right foot and hands were found at Gilgo Beach. They were at first determined to belong to an unidentified victim, thus Jane Doe number 6, but it was later determined that they belonged to the same woman whose torso had been found in 2000. Her right foot had been cut off high above the ankle. They possibly think it was to conceal an identifying mark or tattoo. Then on May 28, 2020, police announced that the remains had been identified as Valerie Mack. Mack had last been seen by family members in the spring or summer of 2000 in the area of Port Republic, New Jersey. The dismembered remains of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor, who we'll talk about next, were both disposed of in a similar manner and in the same part of Manorville, which suggested that they were linked. So Jessica Taylor was 20 years old and living in Manhattan when she went missing on July 21st, 2023. On July 26th, 2000, I said 2023, I meant 2003, sorry about that. But then on July 26th, 2003, 5 days later, Her naked and dismembered torso, missing its head and hands, was discovered 45 miles east of Gilgo in Manorville, New York. Her remains were identified by DNA analysis. Actually, just later that year, it didn't take them that long. Jessica's torso was found atop a pile of scrap wood at the end of a paved access road off of Halsey Manor Road, just north of where it crosses with Long Island Expressway. Plastic sheeting was found underneath the torso, and a tattoo on her body had been mutilated with a sharp instrument, again, probably so it wouldn't be recognized. Further remains found on March 29, 2011 at Gilgo included the remains of a skull, a pair of hands, and a forearm. They were later matched to Jessica. She had worked in Washington, D.C. and Manhattan as a sex worker. Taylor was last seen working around the Port Authority bus station, the bus terminal in Manhattan, between July 18th and the 22nd of July 2003. I'm going to move on, but before, let me just say there are too many victims. Too many. But on September 20th, 2011, police released composite sketches of two more of the unidentified victims. They were dubbed Asian Male and Jane Doe Number 6, whose remains had been found in March and April of 2011. Just to remind you, because this is a lot to keep track of, Jane Doe Number 6 ended up being Valerie Mack. And they also released photos of jewelry. It had been found on the remains of a female toddler and her mother, Jane Doe Number 3. They were found on April 4th and April 11th, respectively. One of the sets of remains found in Nassau County on April 11th was later identified as the mother of the toddler, but this was done through DNA. But this is a lot, so let's talk about those three separately. Let's first talk about Jane Doe Number 3. On April 11th, 2011, police in Nassau County discovered partially dismembered skeletal remains. They were inside a plastic bag near Jones Beach State Park. The victim was dubbed Jane Doe Number 3. DNA analysis later positively indicated that the remains belonged to a woman whose torso had been found in Hempstead Lake State Park 14 years earlier. So 14 years earlier would have been June 28, 1997. The dismembered torso of an unidentified young African-American woman was found there. It was in the town of Lakeview, New York. The torso was found in a green plastic Rubbermaid container, which was dumped next to a road along the west side of the lake. Investigators reported that the victim had a tattoo on her left breast of a heart-shaped peach with a bite mark out of it and 2 drips falling from its core. In December 2016, Peaches and Jane Doe Number 3 were positively identified as being the same person, and they called her Peaches because of the tattoo. The DNA analysis also then identified Peaches as the mother of baby Jane Doe. Peaches was also found wearing gold jewelry that was similar to that of her daughter. Baby Doe was the skeleton of a female toddler. She was between 16 and 24 months of age. But, okay, that's what one account says. Another account says she was between 1 to 4 years of age. And she was found on April 4th, 2011, about 250 feet away from the partial remains of Valerie Mack, or Jane Doe Number 6. The body was wrapped in a blanket and showed no visible signs of trauma. The toddler was reported to be African American and was wearing gold earrings and a gold necklace. I hate stuff about kids. Then there was the Asian male body. He was someone who had died from blunt force trauma and was also discovered on April 4th, 2011 at Gilgo Beach. He was discovered very close to where the first 4 sets of remains had been discovered in December of the previous year, 2010. The victim when he was found, he was wearing women's clothing, and he may possibly have been a transgender or at least a cross-dressing woman. This victim was between the years 17 and 23 years old. He was 5'6". He was missing 4 teeth, and he might have had some kind of disorder which would have affected how he walked, like his gait. The victim had been dead between 5 and 10 years, and in September 2011, the police released a male composite sketch of the victim. Then they found Jane Doe number 7, or they also called her Fire Island Jane Doe. It was a human skull and several teeth were recovered on April 11, 2011 at Tobay Beach. These remains were linked through DNA testing to a set of severed legs found in a garbage bag on Fire Island 15 years earlier on April 20th, 1996. Jane Doe number 7's remains were the second set to be discovered in Nassau County. Those were discovered on April 11th, 2011. Jane Doe number 7 had a surgical scar on her left leg, but that's all they really know. Okay, now here's another one that they think could be from the same killer. It's reaching a little bit, but another possible victim was Tina Elizabeth Foglia. She was a 19-year-old girl that was last seen alive in the early morning hours of February 1st, 1982 at a Hammerhead rock music venue on Sunrise, which is in West Islip, New York. She had hitchhiked from her home to the venue to see a friend performing with the Queens-based band Equinox. Her remains were discovered by the Department of Transportation, workers that were working for them 2 days later on February 3rd. They were on the shoulder of Satigos State Parkway in Suffolk County. Her dismembered body, which had been placed there in 3 separate garbage bags, were found a few miles north of Robert Moses Causeway, which is what leads to Gilgo Beach in Oak Park. A diamond ring that Foglia was known to be wearing was missing, and the DNA of an unknown male was found on the garbage bags. Police have not ruled out the possibility that Tina was an early victim of the Long Island serial killer, but have stated that a connection is not an active avenue of the investigation. Then there was Jacqueline Ashley Smith. She was last seen in Brooklyn on August 7th, 1999, when she was just 16 years old. She had left her home at 9 p.m. to visit friends and never came back. She was reported missing on August 12th of the same year. Then on June 20th, the year 2000, an unidentified female torso was recovered near Beach 88th Street in Rockaway Beach, Queens. The torso was found in plastic bags and wrapped with tape. No other parts of the body were ever recovered, and she wasn't identified for a while. She was considered a missing person. They just didn't know who she was. But then 2 years later, the torso of Andre Isaac was also recovered in Rockaway, not far from where Jacqueline was found. Andre Isaac was a professional drag queen. He was known by his stage name Sugar Bear. He was 6'5" and was 25 years old when he disappeared from East New York in November of 2002. According to a friend, Isaac was last seen shortly before Thanksgiving getting into a car with this secret friend. I don't know why I keep using quotation marks, but the vehicle was described as a red BMW type coupe and was driven by a Hispanic man. Isaac's torso was found close to the boardwalk on Beach 63 Street in Arvern, which is also in Queens. That was discovered December 17th of that year, 2002. On January 25th, 2003, his head was discovered by ice skaters in East Mill Pond in Moriches, New York, which is also in Suffolk County. He had a single bullet wound to the temple. His arms and legs were later found several miles away in plastic bags. Isaac's case was added to the Suffolk County Police Department, like to the Gilgo News website in May 29th of 2010. Again, I think there's just similarities in how they were disposed of. Next, there was Jamie Seymour, who was a 21-year-old escort and drug user who'd been last seen in Brick, New Jersey on July 22nd, 2005. She had called her father on July 22nd to let him know she was on her way to the Port Authority area to meet a client. And okay, I gotta pause there again because here's the thing. You're talking to your dad about picking up clients? What kind of dad are you? Like, are you trying to talk her out of it? Are you helping her out? Are you her pimp? Like, that raised some red flags, but okay. Well, anyways, back to talking about her. Jamie called her dad, and then afterwards, she called her mom later the same day. She was on her way to the Port Authority. But when she called her mom, she used someone else's phone. So I don't know if she didn't have a phone or she was dead, who knows. She's not been seen or heard from since. After that phone call, 2 weeks passed. No one heard from her. They then became worried after 2 weeks. On August 8th, her father reported her missing to the police. Jamie spent time prior to her disappearance in New York and had a criminal record. There haven't been leads in her case, but her sister believes that she met with foul play, and because of her size and where she disappeared, it could be a connection. But the police have never indicated there's any indication that there's between her disappearance and the serial killer. But hear me out. So this is just from what I looked up. Jamie was a young woman with a small frame. She was like the other victims of the Long Island serial killer. She vanished in July, which is similar to the time frame when Melissa Bartholomew, Maureen Brainerd, and Jessica Taylor disappeared. Jamie was also last seen at the same place as Jessica Taylor, the Port Authority bus station in Midtown Manhattan. So now we're going to go on to another one. Her name is Tanya Rush. On July 23, 2008, 39-year-old Tanya was last seen around 3 a.m. walking towards a subway station in Brooklyn. Her dismembered body was found by a state cleaning crew in a black canvas suitcase on June 27, 2008. It was in plain sight of the New Bridge Road ramp leading to the westbound Southern State Parkway in Belmore, New York. Rush was a mother of 3 and had been a Salvation Army volunteer and had worked telemarketing. She took up sex work to support a drug addiction. She was African American and lived in the Van Dyke Houses, which is a Brownsville public housing complex in Brooklyn, New York. So that's another possibility. Not quite the same, but you never know. But now there's cherries. On March 3rd, 2007, a suitcase containing the dismembered torso of an unidentified Hispanic or light-skinned African-American woman washed up on a beach at Harbor Island in the town of Mamaroneck. The victim had a tattoo of 2 cherries on her left breast. It was similar in appearance to the tattoo found on Peaches. She was determined to have been stabbed to death and then dismembered. The victim is referred to as Cherries by investigators, and one of her dismembered legs washed up at Cold Springs Harbor in March of 2007, the other at Oyster Bay in the village of Cove Neck the following day. Cherries was dismembered in a very similar fashion to the other 3 victims, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and Peaches, meaning they think she could be linked to the other official victims. Then there was an unidentified woman in Laddingtown, New York. On January 23rd, 2013, a woman walking her dog found human remains in a small patch of brush in a sandy area along the shore end of the Sheep Lane in Laddington that's in Oyster Bay. The skeletal remains showed signs of trauma and were wrapped in a particular type of material that police have not disclosed. The remains are believed to be those of a woman between the ages of 20 and 30 who is possibly Asian. She was wearing a 22-karat solid gold pig pendant, which seems to be or may be related to the Chinese zodiac year of the pig. So the relevant years of birth for those, like when it could have been her, were 1971, 1983, and 95. With that information, it's thought that she died at the age of 29. Investigators believe that her body had been dumped before Hurricane Sandy in late 2012. Her case may be connected to the other 10 bodies, but they were found 32 miles away. And I mean, it's possible, though unlike the other victims, she was dismembered, it was similar, but her body was buried rather than left above the ground. I want you to know that was a lot. I had to have a timeline right now just so I could get all through all of this. But what happened to these people is horrific. But I hope that after years of tireless investigation and countless sleepless nights for the victims' families, justice has prevailed, and they'll be able to find some peace. I think that maybe they haven't charged Rex with more of the murders because these are the strongest cases. And you don't want to weaken your case by having other cases that could bring you down. You want your strongest stuff to go to court. At least that's what I'm hoping it is. Then maybe if he's convicted, they'll be like, oh, and by the way, these are his as well. But as the court proceedings unfold, we'll have to keep a close eye on the details that emerge. What were the motivations behind these crimes? They were heinous. How did Rex evade capture for so long? Will he be charged with more of them, hopefully? Where did he kill them? There's so much that we need. There's so much that we need to figure out. I don't even know what to do. But I'm gonna grab the pizzas real quick and be right back.
Okay guys, here is the finished product. So good. And if you had not waited to make it with me through this very long tragic story, you could have had it done in 10 minutes in the conventional oven or about 6 minutes in an air fryer. So definitely faster than delivery.
Oh my goodness, guys, these are amazing. They're adult bagel bites. Oh, but you know what I haven't put on them yet though? I haven't put my oil. I'm gonna make it even better. This is some good stuff right here. Trust me, you need to make them if you want a quick dinner some night. They're awesome. They're just so, so good. These are incredible. They're adult bagel bites. I'm gonna go eat mine, probably watch Rescued by Ruby. Great movie, and Blue made me wanna see it. But as you go eat yours, let's remember the victims, the lives tragically cut short, their stories, their struggles, and their families who never gave up hope. This case serves as a reminder that behind every headline, there are real people with dreams and aspirations and troubles. So my beautiful friends, as we eagerly await the trial and further updates in this case, let's remember the power of the pursuit of truth. And if you're craving more intriguing tales, be sure to join me next time for another dark and intriguing journey into the depths of humanity. Until then, stay curious, stay kind, and remember to take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon.